everybody. It is Social Surge with Fly and Mo. A very special edition today. Happy Veterans Day to all of our vets out there. Thank you so much for your service. We appreciate you. I am Mo Regalado. Down below is Miss Fly Jamerson. And over there is Will Curtis, CCIM, who is joining us on the show today. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. We appreciate you. It is Veterans Day. And we do have a special show. So we just kind of threw it together. Actually, we had a completely different show planned for today, which we'll do on Thursday, because I think it's important. I think people, and I'll tease it right now. It's about Federal Trade Communications guidelines on how you are supposed to do sponsored ads. I've actually talked about this before. I've written posts about it, but I am seeing some more like sponsored stuff that is not being said that it's sponsored. And so we're going to talk about that and get into the nitty gritty details on Thursday about that. Because they will come after you. I'm just saying. We have Dr. Fromage is joining us over on the gram. Regalado Real Estate is there. Holly Pennington, thank you for joining us. Aviva Real Estate is joining us over on the gram.
What?
Lady, mwah, 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 mwah. Love you so much. She says, icons, love you all. So fantastic to have you join us. And let's see what our comments are. DB's in the house, joining us from New York City. Nice to meet you, Will, Dwayne says. And Marcy Moneypenny's here. Denver says, thank you for your service. All right. So I am the daughter of a vet. I am married to a vet. I have siblings who are actually, I believe, still currently serving. I have nephews that are in the service. So I come from a long line of military adjacent. How about that? And so I really do appreciate everything that our vets do. But Will, tell us about your background. Tell us about how you actually, I want to know what. First of all, let's back it up. Will, who are you?
I'm a nobody. No, I'm a managing director out of San Antonio. I'm a commercial practitioner, mostly an office broker, and this is my technically third career. Prior to this, I was actually in the service, and kind of part of the reason why we're doing the show today.
Love it. So what branch of the military were you in?
I was in the Army. So I spent a little more than 6 years in the Army. I enlisted in 2004, and then about 2010 is when we got out. I was one of the last groups that got stop loss, which means when you sign up for the military, you automatically sign up for 8 years. It just depends on how much of that is actually going to be active versus inactive, ready reserve. And the government has the ability to say, we're just going to extend your contract on you. Thanks, congratulations. So I was one of the last groups to do that before Congress passed. Literally 2 months after we got stop loss, they passed it saying we're no longer going to do this.
Oh, wow.
Yay for being a last one. So I got to spend a little bit more than the original time, and it was all due to deployment schedules and all that fun stuff.
A little bit more than your average bear, huh?
Yeah, it was fun.
So what was your MOS?
I was a 15 Yankee, which is avionics, weapon systems, and avionics, electronics, and weapon systems repair on the Apache helicopter.
Oh, very cool. So totally unrelated, but kind of related. I lived in Sierra Vista, Arizona, which is the home of Fort Huachuca. And I've told this story before. And Fort Huachuca is kind of like the NORAD of the, it's a very strange place because like everything's underground. Like you wouldn't think that, but like pretty much everything's underground. It's cool. It's a cool place to live. Right. But there used to be this aerostat that they had from Fort Huachuca, big giant balloon, right? And my oldest daughter, so she's now 26, every time we would come home from Tucson, she would see the aerostat and she'd be like, oh, there's my home. It's like, no, your home is not in the balloon. But that's how she associated that we were coming home, is because she could see it. So we lived in Sierra Vista for almost 10 years, and Fort Huachuca was a huge part of kind of the really the community. It really kept the community going for many, many years. And on an unrelated side note, the very first McDonald's drive-through is in Fort, is in Sierra Vista because of the soldiers weren't allowed to get out of their vehicles at lunch.
Yep.
And so that's why like the drive-through thing was invented there in Sierra Vista, Arizona. So Will, you have vets in real estate. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I transitioned out of the military, honestly, I had somebody in the military who we call them a command financial specialist. And ultimately their job is to tell you not to go buy a Mustang for 36% interest rate, how to balance a checkbook, and that you have to give, your partner money, your spouse money. Like, it was really, really basic stuff. And they had sat down and gone through during my first deployment. They sat down and did a very rich dad, poor dad-esque presentation on, here's what investing in real estate is. Here's all this. And at a 2-year-old, I had never thought about this, never looked at it. And, being a young private first class, making all of like $1,300 a month, which is the most money I had ever had made. This guy was talking about the fact that he was making more with 20 plus years of military. He was making more in his real estate investments than he was as a, staff sergeant with, 20 plus years. And I was like, well, this guy is normal. He's an average guy. Maybe I can do that too. So that's what kind of got me on the idea of maybe doing real estate when I got out. My original plan was to do 20 years, stay in and invest in real estate and kind of follow the same path he did. As the GI Bill changed, I was piecing together my degree, and I got to math, and I couldn't teach myself math in an online situation. So I thought, you know what? This new GI Bill came out. They're going to pay me to go to school. Might as well get out, go to school, get my degree, come back, get commissioned, and then I'll have officer money instead of enlisted money and still live like an enlisted guy, but be able to spend the rest investing. And to me, at this point, real estate was just buying and selling houses or flipping them. Like, that's the only thing real estate was to me.
Right.
Ended up finding a degree program that was focused in real estate finance and development, and opened my eyes up to here's commercial, here's everything else that was there. And very quickly had a fraternity brother who said, hey, why don't you come in? Why don't you start, answering phones and turn into doing more leasing and property management and all the kind of things there. And there I was taking that commercial path, which was a great fit for me, but it was pure dumb luck that got me there. And even in my struggle there was a lot of things I struggled with my transition. As I left the military, 3 months after I was in Iraq, and 3 months later, I was sitting in a class with a bunch of freshmen. Like, I was still dealing with the PTSD. I was still dealing with all the things that were going on. Sitting in a class, I remember it was freshman English, sitting there in the class going like, all right, this is really weird. I didn't have those resources. I didn't have people to reach out to. I had nobody to talk to that really understood what I was going through. And that's kind of where Vets in Real Estate started coming in, is that the mentorship that I wish, or the resources that I wish we had, really didn't exist. We had found a group called Veterati, which is a super cool organization where it was really anybody could mentor veterans that were looking to transition. And they would set up kind of hour phone calls. And I mentored there. And one of the things that kept coming back over and over again was, hey, Will, I want to go be a residential appraiser. And I'm like, I have no idea how the hell to do that. Okay, hey, I want to be, a lender. I had no idea, but I was one of the few people that was doing real estate, that was mentoring. So I could tell you about commercial. I could probably tell you a little bit about a residential sales, just being adjacent to knowing what the lifestyle's like, but I couldn't tell you what you could do to actually be successful. And a colleague at the office turned around, and I was kind of just venting with him over lunch over this thing. He's like, why don't you just do this a podcast? You know the questions to ask. You go get the experts and ask the questions that you know that they're going to be asking. Ask those and find out that. And I was like, huh. So it took it about 2 years of finally getting brave enough to start the podcast. And we just finished our first year of doing the podcast. And really it's taking individuals from all walks of life in real estate. So residential sales, we've had appraisers, we've had home inspectors, of course, we have commercial folks. We've had a little bit of everybody on there. And this kind of first phase of what we're working on growing is just have these career fields look like? What are some of those things that make you successful? And then what's been interesting for being a data nerd like I am is success leaves, clues, right? So we're starting to see over and over and over the things that have been successful and the things that most veterans struggle with. And for me, this is what I'm excited about as we try to roll into our next phase of how do we help these veterans to the next level. We're starting to see what those clues are. We're starting to see where success comes from. Some were, not as shocking. Others were things you really wouldn't have thought of, or I thought it was just me and realized that I'm not special. I'm just like everybody else and had a lot of the same struggles.
What are some of those things that you guys are seeing?
So I think one of the things that's been interesting is career fields that come into real estate altogether. So the ones that do extremely well is I would have never thought we'd see a lot of academy grads move into real estate. So if you go to the West Point or Air Force Academy or Naval Academy, a lot of them come into real estate and they absolutely kill it. Now, those individuals that make it to academy are definitely a little bit of a different cut of people.
You're right.
They walk in very strategically, very put together, and it's not your traditional real estate model, which I think is fascinating. We've had, I think they should air, I think we had one air and one's going to air this week, 2 former Special Forces guys that have been in there and talking about, and those guys are obviously cut very different as well, but how they walk in and some of the things they come in. And then oddly enough, we see a lot of military police officers have made that transition, which that one I don't get. That one we're still trying to figure out exactly what it is. But if you think about it, they're used to de-escalating situations. They're used to how to talk to people, how to look at the psychology. So I think there's something there. We just hadn't explored that enough, but it's been interesting to see, those that are transitioning in. But I think what comes interesting is there's kind of this lull. Everybody's excited for a while, and then their business kind of dies and the excitement dies. And they struggle with, I'm not part of that team anymore. I'm not doing the things that I was doing. I know for me, I had a really hard time. The deployment after I left, my unit got hit pretty hard, and I felt guilty for not being there, leading my soldiers, knowing what was going on. I went through that. I thought that was just more uniquely me. But as we've done this conversation over and over and over again, that's really normal.
Right.
And what we've found is that as those veterans, they struggle. And if they can get through that struggle and they find that purpose, if they can sit down and stop serving the unit and start finding if their customers are who they're serving, their communities are who they're serving, however they've been able to flip it and find what they can serve next, we've seen every single time their business explodes. Whereas some of the guests we've had, they're still stuck in that phase. Hey, we've got a good business, but we just haven't exploded, but yet they're still stuck in the, I haven't found a purpose phase yet. And to me, that was interesting because I thought it was just me. Whereas finding that new purpose absolutely makes them explode.
Do you think some of the challenges are they don't have, when we're talking about the businesses that aren't maybe scaling or exploding like you would expect, do you think it's their challenges that they do not have like systems and processes in place? Like when we think about the military, right? We think about very structured, get up at 6, get dressed, brush your teeth, go stand in formation, right? Now you're going to go do your job. Now you have lunch. Now, it's 4 o'clock. It's time to clock off, get in formation, go back to barracks, right? So is there a challenge and issue with the fact that they do not have that kind of structure and they don't have a system or process set up in their own business that is causing that, maybe that lack of forward momentum?
I think structure is part of it, and I think purpose is the other portion of it. When you come into the military, and this is what we try to teach brokerage owners as well, because this is where their veterans, as they transition and struggle. For the moment I enlisted, I knew everything I needed to do to be able to make it to be Sergeant Major of the Army. Now, I definitely wasn't going to make it that far, but I knew every step that I had to do, and I knew that I had to outcompete or do what it is. So my career was basically open for me as long as I made the right moves.
Right.
In real estate, that's not the case. And I think if we could sit down and kind of structure, here's what these should look like, here's what that structure is, what kind of misses. I think some of the other side that comes in there as well is just adjusting to civilian life. From a veteran's perspective, civilians are weird. Now I've been out longer than I've been in at this point, right? So, I've kind of adjusted and all that. But for the first handful of years, I remember being a college student and they're like, yeah, we're going to get drunk. And I'm like, I've got reasons to get drunk. Like, it was a completely different mindset at what's going on.
Don't mean to minimize that. That was just actually funny.
But, when it comes to things like language, like I constantly practice that I can't use the profanity that we use, in a professional setting like we did the military. Just understanding the way you can't be as direct or as blunt in those situations, which is just hallmark communication style. So I think it's some of that transitioning, and some of it's just culture. And I think that's the two things I think we see more often than not is they don't have that structure. They don't understand what they're supposed to be doing. And then just how do you transition? How do you adjust to the culture? And I think at least now that we're not in wartime, like we were, I think it's going to be a lot easier. But I know for my generation, I remember sitting at a Starbucks after my first deployment. I remember sitting at a Starbucks trying to get some coffee. The lady that was in front of me was just blowing up at the barista. And I'm thinking, like, 36 hours ago, I was in a war-torn country. I was happy to have coffee, but yet they gave her soy and not oat, or I don't know. I forget what it was, but they messed up her order, and she was, just giving it to them. And I was like, I'm just happy to have a hot beverage at this point right now. It's cold.
It's all about perspective. Yeah, absolutely. The perspective changes. I know one of my siblings was over in Iraq and then I believe Afghanistan. She's a corpsman in the Navy, and she was telling me how weird it was, like just how utterly bizarre to have been over there and then 24 hours later or whatever the time is, you're walking through a grocery store and you're just like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, this is so weird. And this was probably back in, I don't know, probably 2014, maybe. And she saw some shit. So like as a corpsman, right? Like you're with the Marines and it's, so she saw some shit and just kind of like, how do you explain to your kids? 'Cause she had 2 small boys at the time. Like, how do you explain to your kids, like, mommy can't hug you right now. Like, you gotta give me some space, right? It's like those things that we don't, unless it's actually touching somebody that we know, we don't really think about those things. I know my dad. I think about my dad. My dad has since passed. He died of Agent Orange related cancer. He was in Vietnam. But I think about all of these guys that came back from Vietnam and came back from these wars that, like, we didn't have the resources that we have today. And then, not to say that everybody takes advantage of those resources, but it's a testament to, I guess, human nature to really like just continue to forge on. But speaking about resources, what kind of resources are you, giving to your vets that you're talking to?
Yeah. So, a lot of what I didn't expect the podcast to turn on is a lot of one-on-one phone calls. Which it makes perfect sense. Hey, I'm reaching out, and a perfect story of this, a guy by the name of John Galindo. He was in special operations, sergeant major, getting ready to get out. So top of the food chain, getting ready to get out. Knew he wanted to go into real estate, was already starting to take his CCIM classes, already starting to do all the things before he ever decided. And he just reached out. Hey, I saw you're a veteran. I saw you're in real estate. Just let me ask you questions. And sure enough, it's turned out to be a great friendship over the years. I helped him get plugged into his first brokerage. So I think that's one of the things that and he was actually, I think, our third guest on the podcast, is, really finding that community. And that's really what we're in that phase right now, is trying to build that community where, as you're starting to transition, you have the resources. We're actually right now working on a book that will actually come through and kind of tell some of the story of what's going on. The goal for this is we're waiting for the Department of Defense or Department of War, whatever they're called this week. We're waiting for them to sit down and approve us as a approved business. So we actually go on to the career transition centers all across, drop in our books. So it'll be free to the veterans for them to go out there and get an idea. Hey, this is what real estate looks like. Here's what a career in real estate looks like. Here are the lessons learned. Here are the things that would actually help. And that's that first phase of what we're doing. The goal is, once we get through that phase, is to really build out kind of an educational piece. Makes sense given a lot of my background is education, is kind of, hey, you're 2 years out from getting out of the military. Here's what real estate looks like. Here's what these careers look like. So you're not like me thinking, I'm going to buy houses or I'm going to flip them. In hindsight, knowing what I know now, I should have been an appraiser. I should have been an economic developer, but I didn't know those were even things while I was in service. So open the veterans' eyes to those. And then we're really kind of trying to dive into that second phase, will be, what are those core skills that everybody needs to know? How do you start building a database? How do you start working on sales? How do you start doing all those things? How do you start working with social media and putting yourself out in a positive light? Getting rid of some of the military humor that may not translate nearly as well. I have friends who still to this day use very off-colored jokes from jokes in the military. They'll jump in and they'll say things absolutely inappropriate. And I even looked at running for political office one day, and that's when they went back and looked at all my stuff. They're like, tell me about this. I'm like, I don't really want to. It's a stupid military joke, right? It's those kind of things there. But, you know, how do you start kind of course, being you, but the appropriate business professional you,
Right.
those skills that start to come in that you just need to work on transitioning, you know, and that's kind of where that will go. And then from there, the after transition is going into, okay, here's what you need to do in residential or commercial or appraisal or whatever to find success. Here's the classes, here's all that. And that's that next phase that hopefully by 27, 28, that's our goal there. The goal for 26 is to get the book out and have that going, and then continue building community from there.
And how big is the group that you're working with? It's you and somebody else, or you and a couple other people?
Right now, running it's me and my VA. So it's just a couple of us that are kind of putting it all together. I'm the face, and Sarah, our VA, is the one that's doing all the really hard work in the background, making sure everything happens, making sure the posts are there. Inside our Facebook group, we've got, I don't know, a couple hundred folks that are in there right now, and still working on building the engagement, building all that. It's not a post your listings where a lot of folks are doing, but really trying to change this into a, hey, I'm looking at careers, where should I go? I'm trying to interview brokerages, what questions should I ask? But more of that peer mentoring, which I think, you know, I can say it all day long, but, you know, I was in the Army. Air Force guy is going to think I'm dumb. He wants to hear it from an Air Force guy, right? So, you know, build that camaraderie as best you can through that as well.
It's true. They all have their, I mean, you've seen this, the videos on TikTok where they have all the different, it's the same guy, but he's imitating all the different military people and like from the different branches of service. And then of course, then Space Force comes in, and then people make fun of the Coast Guard. And I mean, it's kind of all those things. I just want to say James Miller's joined us over on the gram, as well as Courtney Edis. Thank you for joining us. We were talking with Will Curtis today. It is Veterans Day, so we were talking about his Vets in Real Estate program. And kind of going over that whole thing. What I love about what you're doing, Will, is the fact that you are setting groundwork and you're creating a guidebook for these vets to actually understand what it means. And it's not just in commercial real estate or real estate. Like you mentioned, it's about home appraisals. It's about, economic development. It's all those different avenues or paths that are industry adjacent that are like, you just don't think about. And to be fair, like, before I got involved with Beth Azor, I didn't think about commercial real estate at all, even though I went to grocery stores, even though I went to doctor's offices, even though I went to malls, right? Did not think about commercial real estate in that aspect, just because you just don't. Like, when I thought real estate, I thought houses, right? Didn't think about apartments, didn't think about industrial. So when you're unaware, even though you're surrounded by this industry, when you're unaware, it just doesn't, your eyes are not open to that aspect of it. What do you think has been the most eye-opening thing for you working with these vets as you're talking to them about their businesses?
I think veterans communicate with each other very differently. And there's just an instant camaraderie. I can remember some of my favorite bosses were prior military, and I mean, HR should have been called on us the way that we talked to each other, but it was just the way we communicated. What I think has been fascinating with the podcast is we've had folks get unbelievably real about talking about their challenges, where we had a guy, Shannon Gatewood. He was a very first home inspector we had on there. And he's like, Will, let me tell you how I screwed up everything in my business. And he just, I mean, open book. Here's what I wish. Here's what I should have done. If I could go back, these are the things that we're doing. If you want to be a home inspector, you actually have to sell your services. You're not just walking through attics and looking at stuff all day. You have to actually run a business. And like, it was so eye-opening that he was that open. Or we had a gentleman who I had known for years, Joe Sloan, sit down and talk about why he chose his brokerage. And he's now the broker and owns several. He's a KW guy, owns several of the KW offices now. But legitimately, as he was transitioning out of the military, he had a medical condition, his kidneys were failing, and somebody from the brokerage, another veteran, turned around and said, "Hey man, so you need a kidney?" And then donated his kidney. He's like, "I am unbelievably grateful to the brokerage because I'm literally alive because of the brokerage." And I don't know. I've never had that kind of connection to a brokerage. I mean, I've loved some of the brokerages I've worked at. They've been great, but I've never I'm alive because of the culture this brokerage has brought. I think just the transparency, sometimes we get on these podcasts and it's, "Oh, look at me, look how awesome I am." And we have a little bit of that too. But overall, just the raw, man, if I could do this again, if you're coming through, which is a very military trait, we all want to compete. We all want to sit down and be the very best, but I don't want to beat you when you're down. I want to beat you when you're at your best.
Right.
And that's a very military mindset. And we've kind of seen that same thing transition. Look, if you're going to come after me, here are the things you can do better. But if you get better, I'm going to have to get better.
Right.
And
absolutely.
That's just been an awesome thing to see as we've kind of grown the community from there, is everybody helping each other from there.
Okay, rapid fire questions before we were coming up on our time. So I'm going to ask you 4 questions. What's a habit from the military you still use daily?
I start early. I'm in the office early. I'm researching early. I still, as much as I hate waking up early in the morning, I am still up early and still very structured in my day.
What's the best leadership advice you received?
Man, that's a tough one. I think the best thing, especially coming from the military, was really advice my dad gave me, was sit down and find what the old guys have done and then mirror their success. So find what's made other people successful, adapt it for modern times, but do what they've done, because there's obviously success in what they've done.
I love that. What is one thing that you wish civilians understood?
We're not all crazy. Maybe we're all a little crazy. But when it comes to PTSD and those kind of things, I think the movies did us a terrible job of everybody's getting into fights and all that kind of stuff, which PTSD looks very, very different. I know in my struggle, mine was more depression. I didn't want to leave the house. I had hard times in large groups. I really had to work through that. Even if you look at me today, I still struggle in those situations. But PTSD, it's real, but it's not the let's beat everybody up and go crazy and shoot up places. It looks very, very different for a lot of different people.
Right. It's not the angry emotive, a lot of what is portrayed on the screen. It can be, but it's not always that. And it's usually an internal struggle. What is your favorite military tradition?
I'm a Cav guy, so of course it's going to be my Stetson and my Spurs. Still to this day, I have my gold Spurs, which you get for going to combat, hanging in my truck in my home office. I still have my Stetson sitting there displayed, happily. Even my business is Cross Sabers commercial, going back to the cavalry tradition. Like for me, just that tradition of cavalry and what it stood for, it stuck with me, and it has been really integral just to my brand, going forward.
I love all that. Before we take off, I know Fly saw something sitting behind you on the bookshelf, and you have to tell us about this.
Yeah, so
show it to me up close.
Sorry, there you go. So a CCIM in our local market. His dad was a CCIM a million years ago as well. They had these old hats that was basically sitting in his closet. And his dad's like, "I'm going to get rid of them." And son's like, "I'm the chapter president. I'll just go to the chapter and let me give them out to everybody." So sure enough, he gave out, there's probably 3 or 4 dozen hats, and he kind of gave out to everybody that's there. But when it comes to veterans, one of the things CCIM is doing is it's one of the cool things that I don't think I've seen other organizations do yet is they actually have through their foundation a veterans scholarship. And it started maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where for veterans, and there's some criteria, but for veterans, they will pay for your CCIM designation. So they pay for basically everything. As I understand, they keep trying to grow the number of scholarships because the applications are just insurmountable at this point. You have so many veterans that are looking at careers in real estate. This is the opportunity. That's one of the things I love giving to the foundation for with CCIM is because I know it's going to help those other veterans that likely wouldn't have had the same opportunity where I got lucky. I was corporate America. They paid for my CCIM. That's not everybody's situation, right? So here's a great opportunity where a foundation and CCIMs are helping others earn their designation after the military service.
I love that. All right. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, Will, with everything that you're doing, how do they do that?
Yeah. So for the Vets in Real Estate side on social media and everywhere, we're just Vets in RE. So, Vets in RE. And then if you're looking at our website, vetsinrealestate.com, you'll find us. You'll find us on socials. And of course, my contact information's all hidden there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Will. I appreciate you. Happy Veterans Day. I'm so glad that you were able to join us today, especially since we sprung that on you at probably like 7 o'clock last night.
Middle of cooking dinner. Yep.
But on Thursday, we're going to be talking about FTC guidelines and what you need to do. James Milner real quick says, great job, Will Curtis. Thank you, James. We appreciate you. You take care as well. Thursday, we're talking about FTC guidelines and what that means for you in the holiday season or any time that you're planning on doing anything with sponsored ads. Got to talk about it because I'm seeing more and more on there. And if you're not mentioning it, you can get in trouble. Can't wait to see you guys back here on Thursday. We'll see you then. And happy Veterans Day.